just talk about?
I don't think there's an extra status required. I think there is an existing status that Māori are tangata whenua, and maybe acknowledging that is enough. I think the question of structure is an old question too. Māori were thinking about governance structures as early as the 1820s and 30s, and so maybe, as I hint in the piece that you're quoting, we could look to the past to think about that question. On the other hand, Jacinda's been in the north for 4 days now, and she hasn't required any new or modified structures. And in the detail of some of the settlement agreements around the country, there is actually plenty of room for the government to, think creatively about being actively engaged with iwi. And I think that several government agencies have already embarked on those kinds of forward-looking, future-thinking relationships. So,
all right. Kia ora, and thank you for joining us today, Araha. Dr. Araha Harris, Waitangi Day tomorrow. Before we go, there's been a concerted attack on Facebook's new Messenger Kids app. The target age group's children between 4 and 12. In the opinion of many psychologists and some big organisations, this age group's not ready to take on the challenges of social media. And now, the most recent development here is a coalition of 97 child health advocacy groups has sent a letter to Mark Zuckerberg asking him to discontinue Messenger Kids. What do you think about these children being on?
I don't think they're old enough to understand privacy and security issues. No matter how many conversations you have with them, they're not necessarily going to know who's at the other end of that message. And children are naturally kind of honest, aren't they? And sometimes say too much. I think it's a really, really dangerous idea. But in a way, the horse is bolted because they can already have those messaging conversations on Instagram and Snapchat and what have you. So they'll find a way. I think it's up to us as parents to have a really honest and open conversation with our children about the risks, because there are many.
Which doesn't always deter.
No.
Does it? What do you think, Dan?
My 6-year-old has just started playing this game called Roblox online, which is a sort of an educational game, but it's online. You can, and the most terrifying thing he said to me the other day was, he goes, "I've made 2 new friends now on Roblox, and we're all hooked up and friends, and we don't know who these people are." And so that's you're thinking, well, now we've got to have these conversations. I think. I don't like to, shoot the messenger, I suppose, pun intended, but, kids are going to always have ways of talking to each other. We need to look at what we teach them about that and how we train them to do that in the most mature way possible, because if it's not Facebook Messenger, it's going to be something else.
There are no ads with Messenger Kids and parental input is required, but mistrust is high anyway. And a leaked document produced by Wired magazine reveals that claims that Facebook, presumably during the development of this, offered advertisers the opportunity to target users as young as 14 during moments of psychological vulnerability, such as when they felt worthless, insecure or stressed.
Horrifying.
So I suppose the question is, can we ever trust the people in charge of the gatekeepers themselves?
I'm starting to hear these very scary stories from friends, and it's hard to draw the line between what's true and what's, paranoia, but we know that we can target ads based on what you're searching, and you go looking for a new camera, and next thing you know, every ad you see is for that camera. Well, I've had friends that have walked into a shop and looked at something, and they get back home and they're getting served ads for this thing that they looked at in a shop, or they've said it out loud using their voice to friends.
We were just having this conversation in the office the other day. And conversations that are then reflected in the advertising you dished up.
And we're all going, how is that happening?
Actually, it's funny you should say that, because I was wondering vaguely a version of that myself. But how could it be happening?
I don't know.
This is the bit we're all worried about, Jim. Is it your microphone on your phone? Is it GPS? Oh, we know that you're in the plumbing supplies section of Bunnings right now, so therefore,
have we been secretly microchipped?
You're in the caramel milk aisle of the New World. We're going to start serving in those ads.
Perhaps there are 14,000 people with notebooks and pads.
Could be that,
writing this down and then phoning it in. I like to think it still happens like that. Oh, you've got us all scared now. Damien Christie, thank you very much for being on the panel today.
Thank you, Jim.
And Paula Penfold, you too.
Thank you, Jim.
Goodness me. And we are back. Oh, no, we're not. Have a lovely Waitangi Day tomorrow, everybody. And we are back on Wednesday with the panel. Rowan Quinn presents Checkpoint tonight.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. Relatives of a 16-year-old Dunedin girl killed on Friday say they've lost the heart of the family. A Dunedin doctor has appeared in court charged with the teenager's murder. Here's our Otago Southland reporter Ian Telfer.
Amber Rose Rush was found dead at a house in Corstorphine on Saturday morning, and her family are devastated. In a statement, they say Amber had an amazing life in front of her and they've lost their hearts with her. The 30-year-old doctor appeared in the Dunedin District Court this afternoon but did not give a plea. He was given interim name suppression until his next appearance, so can't be identified. 3 men yelled and swore at the man from the public gallery during the brief hearing. The man's due to reappear in a fortnight. In Dunedin, Ian Telfer.
A Ngāpuhi elder has praised the Prime Minister for raising the inequality between Māori and Pākehā in her speech at Waitangi. Jacinda Ardern said her government was determined to bridge the gaps in education, imprisonment, poverty and employment. The chair of the Ngāpuhi Mandate Board, Hone Sadler, says the speech and others at the pōwhiri touch the essence of what Te Tiriti is about.
And for her to admit on this marae the high incarceration of Māori. No other Prime Minister has came out in public to say that. And if you listen to the applause at the poignant points that she made, people have warmed to her and her government.
Hone Sadler says it's good that the government realises its responsibilities to Māori do not end with treaty settlements. Jacinda Ardern says it's her intention to return to Waitangi every year for an extended visit. Both Labour and National are labelling today's events at Waitangi a roaring success, with the official pōwhiri running smoothly and without protest. Jacinda Ardern also made history, becoming the first female Prime Minister to speak during the formal proceedings. Ms Ardern, who is spending 5 days at Waitangi, says for her visiting Waitangi will not just be about Waitangi Day itself,
but an opportunity for us to come and to keep working on those practical issues that we've together said we want to work on. That means talking with those local health providers, those in education, local government and mayors. That's what we've done this time, and I'd like to see that keep happening.
Jacinda Ardern. The 7 survivors of the Kiribati ferry disaster survived off a bag of coconuts they salvaged from the sinking. They were found drifting in a dinghy a week after the boat broke up and are now in Tarawa recovering from their ordeal. The editor of Radio Kiribati, Rekimas Nare, has spoken to some of the survivors. He says the coconuts were the only food they had, but they also tried to desalinate seawater in a plastic container. Mr Nare says at least 80 other people were on the overloaded ferry, many of them children. They're all presumed drowned. Mr Nare says the passengers knew something was wrong after they heard a loud crack, and with Nanos still in sight, they wanted to turn back. The captain ignored them and sped up, and a short time later the boat split down the middle. The family of a West Auckland teenager who was killed in flash flooding in the Waitakere Ranges are devastated by his death. Mitch Woolley and his brother Denver were swimming near Cascade Falls when they were swept away on Saturday afternoon. Mitch and his friend Sose Turangaivio were killed, but Denver was rescued from floodwaters after clinging to a tree for several hours. Mitch and Denver's former principal at Flanshaw Road School, Cherie Taylor Patel, says she met with their parents today.
Tracy was just beside herself, and Mike, unfortunately, he'd been away on business in Australia, so he was flying back and got there around lunchtime. So it was a really, really difficult first 12 hours.
Cherie Taylor Patel says the flag at Flanshaw Road School is flying at half-mast today in Mitch Woolley's honour. The West Coast Emergency Management Centre says the next phase of recovery from last week's storm could take up to 3 months. Regional Director Mark Crowe says the Buller District Council Compliance Manager Paul Clarkson will lead the recovery. He'll be supported by council staff and contractors, the local Civil Defence Group and the Ministry of Civil Defence. It's 5:04. Sport, and the Philadelphia Eagles have upset the defending champion New England Patriots to capture their maiden Super Bowl title. Philadelphia prevailed 41-33 in American football's biggest game in Minneapolis this afternoon after they had taken a 21-12 advantage into half-time. The Eagles were beaten in the 1981 and 2005 Super Bowls, and their triumph caps a remarkable late-season run many considered unthinkable when starting quarterback Carson Wentz suffered a season-ending injury in December. The New Zealand men's sevens coach Clark Laidlaw says the window remains open for players to force their way into the Commonwealth Games squad. New Zealand finished a disappointing fourth at the inaugural Hamilton event after falling to Fiji in the semi-finals and losing to Australia in the bronze medal match. Laidlaw has to name a squad of 18 by February the 22nd for April's games and says 6 spots remain up for grabs.
We've got a little bit of time. We don't play again, but we know enough about the players to see where we're at. So yeah, we'll let the dust settle, I suppose. Yeah, it's going to be hard. We've got guys like Trail Joss and Dylan Collier not here. We've got a couple of guys we've picked up at the Nationals that we think may push close once they get a bit of training under their belt. So it's going to be an exciting month.
Clark Laidlaw. The squad will continue to train at their Mount Maunganui base as they whittle down the final selections. And American golfer Gary Woodland has made par on the first playoff hole to beat compatriot Ches Reavie to win the PGA Tour's Phoenix Open. That's the news.
This Waitangi Day morning, Mihi Ngālangi Forbes and Chris Weikaida present a special Waitangi Day program live from the treaty grounds. During the course of the morning, they'll bring you all the news from Waitangi and around the country, and also speak to New Zealanders about what the day means for them, look at issues which have been addressed, and those that are yet to be resolved.
I want the treaty to stand firmly as the unity, the means by which we are made one nation.
Join Mihi Ngālangi Forbes and Chris Weikaida tomorrow morning from 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taumaranui and Taihape, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Scattered showers with thunderstorms and possible localised downpours in Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells tomorrow with isolated showers in the west. Taranaki to Wellington, a few showers, especially about the ranges, but mostly dry in Wellington. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine, but showers about the ranges, spreading elsewhere this afternoon with possible thunderstorms in Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Fine tomorrow morning, then a few showers. Marlborough and Nelson fine, apart from isolated showers about the ranges. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, showers possibly heavy and thundery in Fiordland, clearing tomorrow. Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine, isolated showers in Otago, spreading to Canterbury tonight, clearing from the south tomorrow. Southland, showers becoming frequent for a time tonight, and for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with rain for a time tomorrow. It is 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Katrina. Kia ora, I'm Rowan Quinn. Welcome to Checkpoint. I'm in for John Campbell tonight. Coming up, a 30-year-old Dunedin doctor appears in court charged with the murder of 16-year-old Amber Rose Rush. And friends pay tribute to the teenagers killed in flash flooding in the Waitakere Ranges at the weekend. But we begin tonight at Waitangi, where Jacinda Ardern has made history by becoming the first female Prime Minister to speak during the formal proceedings. And the Labour leader says that's not a privilege she's taking lightly. She's touched on the future, her hopes for her child and her hopes for the future of Crown-Māori relations as she stood on the porch of the wharirunga. Our Deputy Political Editor Chris Bramwell is in Waitangi and joins us via live view from the treaty grounds. Hi Chris, how did it all go?
Kia ora, Rowan. Well, to be honest, it went without a hitch. The pōwhiri, both the opposition and the government, are labelling it a roaring success.
Jacinda Ardern was escorted onto the marae by a wheelchair-bound Titi Whai Harawira and Dame Naida Glavish to a powerful haka pōwhiri from more than 100 Ngāpuhi warriors. 3 taki were laid down during the wero. The Greens leader James Shaw accepted the first, Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters the second, and Ms Ardern's partner Clark Gayford accepted the third. Jacinda Ardern was taken to the maho of the whare, from where she gave her speech. She told those gathered it was a great privilege to be extended the honour of speaking during the formal proceedings.
I do not take lightly the privilege extended to me to speak from this veranda today, not only as Prime Minister, but as a wahine. Tēnā koutou katoa.
The senior National Party MP Stephen Joyce also spoke during the pōwhiri, immediately referring back to when he was on the receiving end of some comical protest action at Waitangi.
We all have our own unique experiences at Waitangi. One of mine is probably a bit more unique than most. And hopefully for all you, it stays that way.
In 2016, Mr Joyce was hit in the face by a rubber sex toy thrown by a TPP protester. He says he hasn't been looking over his shoulder this year.
No, not at all. I've brought two very tall guys with long arms with me, the local MP and the MP for Bay of Plenty, and they're the slip fielders if required.
The Deputy Prime Minister, Winston Peters, says today's proceedings could not have gone better.
Well, to be honest, it's a serious relief and a serious success. Very harmonious event. You'd have to go back 40 years to have seen that.
Jacinda Ardern says it's her intention to return to Waitangi every year.
I've come to Waitangi on years where there has been peace and years where there have been protests. You know, that's part of our national day. And so my hope and expectation is that I can keep coming no matter what.
But will her future visits last as long as this one?
I intend, no matter what, that Waitangi Day will not just be about the commemoration, the day before and on the day, but an opportunity for us to come and to keep working on those practical issues that we've together said we want to work on. That means talking with those local health providers, those in education, local government and mayors. That's what we've done this time, and I'd like to see that keep happening.
Thank you. You've got a special question?
After all the formalities, the Prime Minister visited Pahia Primary School, where she was swamped by children wanting to ask questions and asking her to sign their lunchboxes.
If you were Prime Minister, what would you like to do? What's the first thing you think you'd do?
Paperwork.
Paperwork. Oh my gosh, you know the job already.
The final event for today is the Beat the Retreat back up at the Waitangi Treaty Grounds ahead of tomorrow's dawn service.
Well, Chris, that pretty much sounds like a dream run there.
Yes, to be honest, it couldn't have gone much better. And I think part of it really is moving the whole ceremony away from Titi Marae down the bottom up here to Te Whare Runanga on the upper grounds. There's more space, there's beautiful big shade trees, so there was a lot more room for everyone at the haka pōwhiri. The other thing is, obviously, it's the first visit for a new Prime Minister and a new government, so there is a bit of a sense of a honeymoon period. But the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, did say, look, we understand this and we want you to hold us to account when we come back. So there's an understanding from her that in 1 year, in 3 years, that she will be held to account, but she says that she intends to keep coming. I also asked her, as you heard in the package there, whether she'll continue to come for 5 days as she had this time, and she intends to keep doing that. The other aspect of today really is that we had the National Party on the paipai alongside the government parties, so sitting alongside the Green Party, New Zealand First and Labour. They also all spoke in the formal pōwhiri doing their speeches, and I think that takes some of the political heat out of it. So that's a big change as well. I guess the other thing really is whether or not the opposition leader Bill English will return to Waitangi in the future. Tomorrow he's going to be down south at Ngai Tahu's event down in Bluff, and Stephen Joyce said that perhaps he will, but really he also thinks that it's a good thing that they spread the MPs around the country for the commemorations to take some of the focus away from it being only at Waitangi and to make it more of a national day.
Thanks very much, Chris. That's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell, live from Waitangi. Well, there were tense scenes today in court as a 30-year-old Dunedin doctor was charged with the murder of a 16-year-old girl. The family of Amber Rose Rush has spoken out about their devastation at her killing in the suburb of Corstorphine on Friday night. Our Otago Southland reporter Ian Telfer was in court and I asked him what happened there.
Rowan, there was a brief appearance from the 30-year-old man earlier this afternoon. He came into the dock. He did not give a plea today and to the charge of murder, but he was there to argue, his lawyer was there to argue on his behalf. Ms. Sarah Saunderson-Warner said that that he had been arrested late last night and that he'd had hardly any time to notify his own friends and family, and therefore she argued for his name to be protected. So he was given interim name suppression by the JP today. And so we can't name him. We can say that he was a 30-year-old man from Dunedin and that he's a doctor. We can't say more than that at this stage. During the hearing, though, there was quite a lot of tension because there were friends and family in the dock, in the public gallery, and Some of them took the opportunity to yell quite loudly and quite violently at the accused. And as he was led away from this brief appearance, they swore very loudly at him. One man rushed to the front of the public gallery and swore at him, and then he was led away. So clearly a lot of emotions running high.
And Ian, what do we know about what happened at the weekend?
Yes, well, we don't know a lot yet. I visited the scene this morning up in Clermiston Avenue in Corstorphine, which is a sort of a poorer part of Dunedin, up in the hill suburbs in the south of Dunedin. Now, the house has got emergency police tape all over it at the front. So it's crisscrossed, if you like, by it. And there's a police caravan there, but there was no sign of anyone this morning. There are 3 cars, though, in the front yard that have all been sort of tied down by emergency tape. I don't know whether they're part of the investigation or not, or whether they're just been not allowed to leave. But no sign of anyone. But what we do know now is that the police were called to this address on Saturday morning and found Amber Rose Rush dead at the scene, the 16-year-old. But it may have been, and it now appears that she was killed on the Friday night. So, obviously there's more details to come about that, but it seems as if they have discovered her the next morning.
And Ian, what do we know so far about Amber Rose?
Well, tributes are just starting to come in from her. Her family have actually spoken very, very quickly about this. They're clearly very devastated by her death, as you would be. But she issued a statement to us, and this is what they said. She was everything. She was the heart of our family. She was the most amazing daughter, auntie, sister anyone could dream of having. She had an amazing life in front of her, and that animal took her all away and took all our hearts with her. So you can see there straight away that the family is grieving very heavily, and the family and supporters who were in court today, also showed that this may be a very, very long grieving process and quite a difficult court case to sit through.
That's our Dunedin reporter Ian Telfer there. One of the teenagers who was killed in flash flooding in the Waitakere Ranges had been trying to help his friend when he was swept away. Mitch Woodley and Sosi Turangi Viu had been swimming with 3 others near Cascade Falls when they were caught in a sudden downpour on Saturday. Mitch's twin brother Denver was also swept away in the deluge but was rescued after clinging to a tree in floodwaters for several hours. Our reporters Nita Blake-Person and Laura Tupou have been speaking to those who knew the boys.
Yeah, so here on the wall we have a photo of Mitch when he was in year 4 and they were doing...
Mitch and Denver Woolley take pride of place on the board behind Flanshaw Road School Principal Cherie Taylor Patel's desk. They were students at the primary school and their mother, Tracy, is an associate principal there. Today the school's flag is flying at half-mast.
Part of the tradition here that we would do that if we have someone in our community pass away. We really like it when we only have to use it for Anzac ceremonies. Yeah, but this week's not one of those weeks.
Dr. Taylor Patel says she met with the family, Denver and parents Tracy and Mike, today. She says they've got great support from whānau and friends.
They started trolling for photos and, tough time.
Dr. Taylor Patel says she last saw the brothers last week when Mitch had gotten his driver's licence and was officially on the road.
We all needed to hold our breath when he sort of came down the Waitakeres there and in the car, but he was just doing so well, and he had so much to live for.
She says the two were twins but not identical. Their parents had struggled to conceive, so when the twins came along, they gave them all the opportunities they could. That included enjoying the outdoors in the Waitakere Ranges.
They knew the tracks, they were scouts, they were such good kids. They would never have done anything stupid.
Dr. Taylor Patel says Mitch was a fantastic student.
He never ever had an unkind word to say. So the thing about Mitch was he was absolutely everyone's friend. He was really sociable, I would say gregarious, and he was a great team player. So he was in soccer teams, he was in water polo teams, but he was in all the teams that you can imagine.
She says the boy's mother dropped them off for a swim at Cascade Falls on Saturday but turned back as soon as it started to rain. 2 of the boy's friends had managed to cross the bridge to raise the alarm when the 3 others got stuck. She says the family is devastated.
Tracy was just beside herself And Mike, unfortunately, he'd been away on business in Australia, so he was flying back and got there around lunchtime. So it was a really, really difficult first 12 hours.
She described Mitch as a great kid.
An amazing brother, a really kind friend, a wonderful son. I just know that everyone will be remembering great things and great days and great times that they had with him.
Abhishek Sharma had been at Massey High School with the boys and Sosi Turanga Iviu. He'd been in the school football team with Mitch and was particularly close with Sosi, saying they were the best of friends.
Sosi used to step up to his roles in school. If, for example, someone gets angry, and you know how boys get angry, someone would want to fight or something like that, he would be like the peacemaker of the group, and he'll try stopping everything.
Abhishek says Mitch and Sosi had been playing paintball with Denver and 2 other boys on Saturday before they headed out to the ranges.
I heard Nathan had slipped, and Sosi had tried saving Nathan. This was told by Denver yesterday when I went to see him. And after that, it just started raining a lot. So I think Mitch had swept in the water, and so did Sosi.
Abhishek says Sosi had just started year 13 at Massey High School, and Mitch had recently left to take up an engineering apprenticeship he secured through school. Mitch had been goalie on the school's soccer team and played in the school band.
They were very helpful and humble boys. Anything you just ask them and they'll be there for you.
Abhishek has been visiting with the boys' families as well as those injured in the flooding. He says one of the boys caught up in the flood had been in intensive care over the weekend and everyone had been rallying to support those affected. Massey High School was closed today for the long weekend, but staff were meeting with the Ministry of Education's Traumatic Incident Team to come up with a support plan for students when they head back to class on Wednesday. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Nita Blakeperson, aho.
Information about sexual misconduct in the workplace will be collected by the government for the first time so it can identify how widespread the issue is. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment collects data on harassment or bullying, but not on sexual harassment specifically. That'll change in July, but some employers say there's no guarantee it will help those who've experienced harassment. Jessie Chang reports.
For the first time, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment will be tracking sexual misconduct in the workplace. It says the information collected will be confidential and all identifying features will be removed from incidents reported to them. The Minister for Women, Julie Ann Genter, says she asked the ministry to start keeping records to understand the scale of the problem. She says she was moved by the Me Too campaign last year, which saw hundreds of thousands of people around the world come forward publicly with their stories of sexual abuse.
I've been incredibly inspired by the bravery and courage of all those who shared their stories to the Me Too campaign, which has now grown into the Time's Up over in the United States, but also my own parliamentary colleagues speaking out last term about their experience.
Help Auckland, an organisation for those who have suffered from sexual abuse, says the move is a step in the right direction. Its executive director, Catherine McPhillips, says traditionally mediation has been used to solve sexual misconduct at work, but that has its problems.
Whether they have institutional power because they're a team leader, with the person with a kind of a lower rank in the organisation, or whether they have expert power or they've just been there for longer, whatever it is that gives the person doing the harassing more power, when you put people into a situation of mediation, then that power can continue to exert its effects and you don't really get a true mediation.
But the Employers and Manufacturers Association is unsure about how much good gathering this kind of information would do. Its chief executive, Campbell, says in order to truly solve sexual harassment in the workplace, there needs to be a culture change.
What we need is the society, our norms, it's just like teaching your kids good manners or how to wash behind their ears. Really, we need to think about in our society how we all behave towards each other. And then I think a more useful emphasis might be there.
But the Human Rights Commission says employers need to be part of the change. Its Equal Opportunities Commissioner Jackie Blue says it's important that businesses do their part.
Employers should not be waiting to July. They should be actually looking now to see that they've got a sexual harassment policy, that it's accessible, it's clear, that their employees know about it, where it is, how they can access it.
Ms Genter says she has asked officials for advice on what steps the government can take after the data is put together. She says she wants to engage with employers, women and people in the community to stop sexual misconduct in the workplace. MBIE says it will continue to work with the Human Rights Commission and with community organisations who help people make those types of complaints. For Checkpoint, ko Jessie Chang, TNA.
A planned expressway linking Waitangi to Levin is threatening up to 200 houses. The road is part of the Northern Corridor project, providing a faster way to get to Wellington. The New Zealand Transport Agency today released a shortlist of 9 options for the 4-lane state highway, which will start at Taylors Road north of Waitangi and end just north of Levin. 2 of those options would go through the properties of Simon Burgess and his family. Mr Burgess had hoped to retire at the property, and his parents' ashes are buried in the front yard. He tells our reporter Laura Dooney he understands why a bypass is needed, but asks why the Transport Agency is considering routes that impact on so many homes.
It appears on the current corridor proposals that it's going to come right through this property directly. We don't know, but that's what it looks like on their small-scale map.
Okay, and have you been in touch with the Transport Agency?
I rang them last Tuesday. On the weekend I got a call back from my answer phone message, and I've rang them again today.
Okay, so not much back from them?
Not a lot so far, no. With the new brochure arrived in the mail today, which basically boiled it down to 3 options, all of which affect us one way or the other. As I say, the worst proposal being that the corridor comes directly through this property, and as it's going to be at least 100 metres wide, it'll affect myself and my brothers who are either side of me.
So how would it affect the rest of your family?
It would affect my brother's business. He has farming and landscaping interests. The other brother, basically it would destroy his small holding. And any developmental plans that they might have had for those properties, which, you know, have obviously been there for some time, but we don't know how that affects future planning for the properties anyway.
What would it mean for you if it was to come through this property?
What, relocation? The absolute destruction of any retirement dreams that I might have had.
What were those dreams?
Basically to stay here and enjoy life as best I could. But I mean, I have grandchildren that come and visit me regularly, stay for the holidays. This is an ideal place to have family. It was a family home, and I hope that it would remain so. It's the centre of my family that live in this area. I have my parents' ashes in the front yard, and we still celebrate together regularly.
If you did have to move on, do you know where you might go?
No idea at all. Blank slate, really. And I mean, that's the problem, because we don't know if they'll reimburse us adequately, or what market value means when they come to that.
How have you found the consultation process then so far?
Not particularly relevant for me. They've boiled it down from some 10 options to 3 that affect me directly. They have ignored the community wish that the corridor go to the west of Levin, and seem intent on driving it through on this side. And they've given their reasons, but I suspect that they haven't given us all the reasons.
So when you say the 3 options, does it either option they choose, will that affect you in some way?
So there are 3 options. One is to follow Arapaipai Road, which is the main Highway 57 at the moment, and there are other 2 completely new corridors that come, from what I can see on their map, come directly through this property.
Okay, and so what's next for you?
Talk to them when they deign to respond, and to be closely involved in the community reaction. There is a representative committee of which family members are engaged in. I mean, I guess you have to consider some sort of protest, but that's not very fashionable these days, is it?
So you would consider a protest?
I would certainly feel the need to make some noise about it. I mean, they're a government department. They operate like all government departments. They have political masters, and they are, I guess, I hope sensitive to public opinion.
That's Levin resident Simon Burgess speaking to our reporter Laura Dooney. And coming up here on Checkpoint, dairy cows have been blamed for the high E. coli levels which have forced the closure of popular Patea River swimming holes. West Coasters will mark Waitangi Day tomorrow with a working bee to clean up Cobden Beach following last week's storm. And thousands of people flocked to the Dunedin Botanic Garden for a whiff of the city's first blooming corpse flower. We love your feedback. You can text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Right now though, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
Relatives of a 16-year-old Dunedin girl found dead at the weekend say they've lost the heart of the family. A Dunedin doctor has appeared in court charged with the teenager's murder. 3 men yelled and swore at the man from the public gallery during the brief hearing. He didn't enter a plea and will reappear in 2 weeks. Today's events at Waitangi have been described as a roaring success, with the official pōwhiri running smoothly and without protest. Jacinda Ardern also made history, becoming the first female Prime Minister to speak during the formal proceedings. She says she'll return to Waitangi every year for an extended visit. The parents of one of the teenagers killed in flash flooding in the Waitakere Ranges say he died at a time when the world was just opening up to him. Mitch Woolley and his twin brother Denver were crossing a river near Cascade Falls when they were swept away on Saturday afternoon. Mitch and his friend Sose Turanga Ivio were killed, but Denver was rescued after clinging to a tree for several hours. The Woolley family says Mitch was about to start an apprenticeship as a marine engineer. Dairy cows have been blamed for the high E. coli levels which have closed popular Patea River swimming holes in Stratford since late December. On February the 1st, E. coli was recorded at well over double the Ministry for Environment's unacceptable risk level, a mark that's been exceeded 6 times in the past 2 months. A search is underway at Sumner Beach in Christchurch for a teenage boy reported missing in the sea. Police say they got a call at 3:20 today. A helicopter is involved in the search, as well as police and teams from Sumner Surf Lifesaving. The Ministry of Health is working on developing more vaccination programs against the mumps. An epidemic broke out in Auckland last year and the Ministry was made aware of 50 cases in January. Health professionals are calling for catch-up vaccinations as the school year begins. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. And turning to business news now with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona. The specialist insurer CBL says it's going to make some big losses following a review of its European business. So what's happened there?
Well, they had this, there was a business in Gibraltar which was writing French construction policies through CBL, and they ran out of money about July last year and stopped writing policies. And when that happened, CBL had to undertake a review. And that review showed that they were undercapitalized in terms of potential claims against those businesses to the tune of $100 million. Wow. So $10 million for the last financial year ending in 2017 and $90 million for the years before. So a lot of money. On top of that, they also found an accounting discrepancy worth $44 million as a one-time cost. So that's taken a big chunk out of their bottom line for 2017. So their year ends December 31st. They're expecting losses in the order of $75 to $85 million, and that compares with 2016's profit of $31 million. It's a big, big drop. And so it's quite disappointing for the company. They're looking at now maybe having to raise additional capital to keep their company in a good position and also return to profitability. Yeah.
And Nona, the media companies, NZME and Stuff, they're looking to appeal the Commerce Commission has moved to block their merger. What's her argument there?
So over, I guess it was they've been after a merger for maybe, it seems like a couple of years now, right? It's been a while. So the Commerce Commission declined their merger application initially. They thought that it would reduce the diversity of voices in the media. And so that was the reason why NZME, being a very large publisher, as well as Fairfax, which is now known as Stuff, of course. So they went to the High Court and hoped to have that overturned. The High Court found that even though there were some benefits which the Commerce Commission did not quantify in its decision to stop the merger, they still sided with the Commerce Commission. So NZME and Stuff have looked at that decision, and they've decided that there are benefits which the Commerce Commission didn't acknowledge or didn't consider, so they're going to appeal on the grounds that there are some benefits to consumers and the public at large, and that the concern about the lack of diversity of media voices was overstated by the Commission. And so, yeah, they're going to go back to court. They're going to aim. And so, yeah, it's important, I guess, for them to continue this effort. Certainly, they feel that they need to merge very strongly. And we'll see what happens with that. Yeah.
And what's happened on the markets following that big Wall Street fall, which was the biggest in 10 years, is that right?
Yeah, big drop, 2.5%. But you'd expect that, the market's been rising really quite steadily since Donald Trump was elected. Now, coincidentally, it just so happens that on the day that that Donald Trump was elected, the market had in New Zealand its biggest fall for some time, 3.3%. Today, it fell just over 2%. So the largest fall was coincidentally the day that Donald Trump was elected. Now, what's happened is the very strong employment numbers came through on Saturday, and that's given rise to concerns that the U.S. Federal Reserve are going to hike interest rates higher, faster than had been previously forecast. And the reason why this is important to the market is long-term debt. So that's the debt markets, which is typically where retirees would put their money to chase a higher yield so they'd have a fixed income over time. Those interest rates have been extremely low for many years now, and suddenly there's a rise coming. So that's shifting the money out of those markets and into those more fixed income types of investments. And you'd expect to see that. But it's really driven the market down for sure in New Zealand and also in Asia. And of course, the US dollar, there's been a lot of movement there. It's moved up. That's driven down our dollar. So it's been a big day on the markets.
Yeah, and then how did they finish up today?
Well, okay, so our market, again, fell down. It was 173 points at the close, down to 8,242. And the dollar is holding steady at 72.9 US cents, 92 Australian and 51.7 pence.
Thank you very much. That's Nona Peltier there joining us for business. And let's go to weather now with the Met Service meteorologist John Law. Kia ora, John.
Kia ora, rather a good-looking Waitangi day for many of us. Just a few showers to watch out for, perhaps on those western parts of Northland and Auckland. But for many of us, it is a dry day. Temperatures, though, a little bit cooler, 24 degrees Celsius in the Auckland region. Across the North Island, though, generally a dry-looking story. A few showers springing up across the western parts through Waikato and perhaps up in towards the Bay of Plenty. But temperatures, I think, cooler than they've been used to, but still climbing into the 20s for many of us. Highs, though, Tauranga, 27 degrees Celsius. For Wellington, a bit of a cloudier start, particularly up towards the Kapiti coast, but it should brighten up as we head through the afternoon. The winds turning more southerly, perhaps bringing with it an isolated shower, but many places it's staying dry. For the likes of, say, Hawke's Bay and up in towards the Wairarapa, thickening cloud through the afternoon, perhaps bringing an isolated shower or so. Highs up towards Gisborne, around 27 degrees Celsius. For the South Island, it's a cloudy start through Canterbury. A few showers to clear off through the morning time, but brighter in the afternoon. On the cool side, though, lows around about 11 degrees Celsius and climbing to 17 or so for Christchurch. And a really cool start today through central Otago. As we head through in towards the morning time, we'll find a few showers across the far southern parts of the country, through Southland up and towards Otago. They'll clear off as we head through the daytime. Some brighter spells returning, but still feeling cool for the likes of Queenstown, with highs around about 17 degrees Celsius. That's it from me.
Thanks, John. Dairy cows have been blamed for the high E. coli levels which have forced the closure of the popular Patea River swimming holes in Stratford for more than a month. On February the 1st, E. coli was recorded at well over double the Ministry for the Environment's unacceptable risk level, a mark that's been exceeded 6 times since early December. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has been in Stratford.
After school and at weekends, the King Edward Park swimming holes are usually packed with young people diving from the banks and generally cooling off. But not this summer. The first action level recording for E. coli came on December the 4th, and signs warning people not to swim, drink or fish from the Patia River went up later that month. The Taranaki Regional Council is responsible for monitoring the region's water quality. In a statement, its Environmental Quality Director Gary Bedford says DNA testing has found cows are the source of the E. coli, and it is investigating above the catchment to locate the farm responsible. At the First Bridge waterhole today, Graham Harkness couldn't believe people are not allowed in the river.
It's amazing because we used to catch freshwater crays, have fires on the bankside, cook freshwater cray, kura, and roast spuds and so forth, and swim without any concern about, our health and safety.
Aucklander Molly Croon usually swims in the river when she comes to visit her grandmother, but not this year.
Yeah, because we came down to Grandma's farm every holiday, and then we'd come down to the swimming pools, and then sometimes we'd have a dip.
So how do you feel when you see signs like that warning you not to go in the water?
It's quite sad because I used to love being in the water. Now I just feel kind of gross. I wouldn't get in there now.
Mr. Harkness laid the blame firmly at the feet of farmers.
I'm pretty sure it's because of overstocking. They're just putting too many animals on what the land can naturally take, and they're using bought-in feed to make the situation worse. I know we hear all the things that they're doing a lot, but it's obviously not enough.
The provincial president of Federated Farmers, Donald McIntyre, says the area above the catchment is dairy country, but that didn't mean any one farmer was at fault.
Source point that is probably more of interest, because you've got to remember in recent times we've had some high intensity rainfall, so it could be across land rather than a discharge from a treatment facility.
Mr. McIntyre, who's also a regional councillor, says he trusts the council to track down the problem and take the appropriate action. In the past, the regional council has fined farmers in breach of effluent consents tens of thousands of dollars. Environmental activist Sarah Roberts, however, has been less than impressed with the regional council's water quality testing regime this summer.
Quite concerned because it's been known for some time that there's issues with the water here. The signs went up late December, but right from early on when they were testing there was high E. coli spikes and big gaps in the testing.
There was no testing done at King Edward Park between December the 8th and January the 10th. The council says efficient use of staff resources meant both the fresh and coastal water samples are taken on the same run, and testing criteria for both were not met during that period. Despite the warning signs at the First Bridge, dog walker Tricia Jamieson had no qualms about letting Kano and Loki into the river. You seem quite happy to let your dogs in the water, you're not concerned?
Well, I'm comfortable to let these guys here because I know this is flowing water, and the problem is with the standing water where the ducks are or where the bacterial contamination is. Yep. I bring these guys down every day and they don't have any problems.
E. coli can cause diarrhea, stomach pain or cramps, flu-like symptoms, nausea and vomiting. If you believe you have symptoms, it's advised you see a doctor. I Taranaki mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Robin Martin tēnei.
West Coasters will mark Waitangi Day tomorrow with a working bee to clean up Cobden Beach following last week's storm. Tens of thousands of plastic bags were left exposed on the beach following ex-tropical cyclone Ferry. And while most of the rubbish has been removed by contractors, the Grey District Mayor Tony Cockshawn is urging locals to help finish the job from 9 o'clock tomorrow. Tracy Neal reports.
Historic Granity, about 30 kilometres northeast of Westport, was one of the worst hit areas in last week's storm. It's where Rona Perrott lives and operates tourism business Miners on Sea. It's set back about 100 metres from the water's edge, but last Thursday she and her staff fled quickly for refuge in Westport.
The sea came right up to our buildings, and it's basically left debris sprinkled all over the gardens area. But what it did was submerge the electric system, so we've got no services to the place.
Today she's back to begin the clean-up and is camping out until the electrics and sewerage are back up and running. The Buller Council's Chief Executive, Andy Gowland-Douglas, says 31 of the district's seriously damaged homes have been red-stickered and possibly can't be lived in again. A further 26 are yellow-stickered, meaning they've been flood-damaged but are more likely to be repairable.
There's been a massive effort over the weekend with volunteers going out, particularly to the north area, and doing a clean-up. So we're going to have trucks going and picking a lot of that stuff up over this coming week. Individual homes, there's a lot of mess to be cleaned up there, and there's been just such great goodwill with the community coming and helping others and getting in and getting stuck in and getting it done.
Mrs Gowland-Douglas says the damage is concentrated in areas around northern Buller, but most of the damaged homes are in Westport. She says arrangements have been made for those who need help.
The majority have gone with friends and family, and then we've got a small number that have gone into the motel accommodation that we've set up through the Welfare Centre.
Further south in Greymouth, efforts are at full speed to prevent an environmental disaster on its beaches. Grey District Mayor Tony Coxon says a decommissioned rubbish dump at the mouth of the Grey River was clawed open by the sea and its contents strewn over the beach.
There's a real problem. There's lots of plastic bags that have come out of the dump and are on the beach and floating out at sea and coming up south of Greymouth. So our immediate attention is an environmental problem with that dump.
Mr Coxon says the council met under urgency last week and has agreed to spend up to $1 million on fixing the dump in Cobden. But the immediate priority is preventing further pollution.
We've had a major operation with contractors on Saturday and cleaned up most, but tomorrow morning, Waitangi Day at 9 a.m, we're having a big working bee with the public, and we hope we can actually clean up all the other plastic bags off the beaches.
Westland Milk Products, which represents 400 farmers along the coast, says business is getting back on track after production was halted by the storm. Spokesman Steve Atwood says they are still counting the cost, but it's likely many thousands of litres of milk will have been dumped. He says it's not an easy thing to do.
This is their livelihood. You know, nobody likes to put all of that time and energy into producing a perfectly good product and then have to recycle it to their effluent systems. But, you know, this was a crisis situation.
Mr Atwood says assistance packages are still being worked through and insurance is likely to be complex. Rona Perrott says her focus right now is on getting back up and running for the expected influx of guests for this weekend's Buller Marathon.
Obviously we've got forward bookings and I've had to cancel a lot of those, so I'm hoping to get up and running this week, and it's just a matter of working with people and trying to make sure it happens.
Andy Gowland-Douglas says what's needed most right now is moral support to keep the clean-up momentum going. For Checkpoint, Tracy Neal.
Officials say an Amtrak train that collided with a parked freight train in South Carolina, killing the Amtrak engineer and conductor, was on the wrong track. It was the railroad's third fatal crash in as many months. Diane Hodges from Reuters reports.
Officials say an Amtrak passenger train was traveling on the wrong track when it collided with a freight train southwest of Columbia, South Carolina early Sunday morning. The engineer and conductor on the Amtrak train were killed, and at least 116 passengers were injured, according to officials. They say no one was on the freight train at the time of the crash. South Carolina's governor says the CSX freight train was parked on a side track. It's not clear how the Amtrak train got onto it. It's the latest in a series of accidents involving Amtrak. In December, 3 people were killed when an Amtrak train derailed in Washington state. The engineer said he misread a signal. In late January, a train carrying Republican members of Congress collided with a garbage truck at a crossing in Virginia, killing 1 person in the truck. The cause of that crash is still under investigation.
And that was Diane Hodges there reporting for Reuters. Well, undercover police operations are hazardous at the best of times, but passing more than $1 million Australian taxpayer dollars to a man suspected of laundering money for terror groups, international drug cartels and bikie gangs is a whole new level of risk. The Australian Current Affairs program Four Corners has revealed that Australian and US law enforcement agencies use that tactic to bring down $1 billion money laundering syndicate. The ABC's Linton Besser has this report.
For decades, Altaf Kanani was on the most wanted lists of police around the globe.
He was an untouchable. He was somebody that could not be grabbed by law enforcement.
Rob Casita from the US Drug Enforcement Administration says the Pakistani operating out of Dubai washed the profits of the world's most dangerous criminals and terrorists.
I always kind of liken him to a James Bond villain. He fits the mold. He has a worldwide network, moves billions of dollars, has all this at his disposal, is the leader of a transnational organization.
Multiple police stings in Australia, which seized millions of dollars in cash and drugs, kept leading authorities back to Kanani. Richard Grant was the National Manager for Operational Strategy at the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission.
We then started to go further up the tree and understand who was behind organising these contracts and the movement of money. And that's when, time and time again, Altaf Kanani came up.
In 2014, the ACIC approached the US DEA and came up with an audacious plan to pose as an international drug syndicate and convince Altaf Kanani to launder money for undercover operatives. For the sting to work, they needed a significant amount of real cash, and that is where the Australian taxpayer came in. Richard Grant again.
We went to the CEO, Chief Executive Officer and pitched the work. He thought it was a good sound strategy, he knew there were risks. He signed the document to give us $250,000 and then did say to me that my ass was in the sling. I get that. If you don't take risks, you don't get the results.
Richard Grant says waiting to hear if Kanani's network had laundered the first cash drop was nerve-wracking. There was a real risk the money could end up in the pocket of a man with links to Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah and the Sinaloa drug cartel.
You've got a number of things swinging in the wind, and you don't know whether the money's going to be lost, you don't know whether the operation's going to be compromised. There's so many moving pieces. When I got the phone call on the 8th of January to say the money's gone through, so thankfully my backside was no longer in that sling.
This sting to trap Altaf Kanani was the first time law enforcement agencies from the US, the UK, Australia, Canada and New Zealand, known as the Five Eyes, had worked together to catch an organised crime figure. After a 10-month undercover operation, Kanani was arrested in Panama and extradited to the United States.
Linton Besser reporting there. Well, looking younger, getting fit and losing weight is the holy grail for many. Now, an Auckland doctor has developed a test which could show you how your genes could be helping or hindering you achieving that goal. The test looks at 21 genes and can tell what sports you're best suited for, what you should eat for better health and to prevent some diseases. Our sceptical reporter Sally Murphy took the test and discovered some odd things about herself.
It started with spitting into a test tube. My saliva then travelled all the way to the United States, where 21 of my genes were tested. They included stress, fat and sluggish genes, as well as how my body deals with salt, sugar, starch and vitamins. Dr. Sharad Paul developed this particular test.
As far as exercise goes, you're better suited to more power and strength exercises than endurance, which means you're not like a runner.
I've tried to be a runner, it didn't work.
I think one thing to understand is genes are a blueprint, but they're not our destiny. So really, if you wanted to become an endurance runner and you kept running, you will express some genes, which means you can get good at it, but you're not going to be natural at it.
The test results show I'm not anxious, but I risk becoming low in vitamin D and folate, and if I eat lots of sugar, my body is at a higher risk of developing diabetes. It also shows my body doesn't process caffeine fast, so if I drink too much coffee, I have a higher risk of getting heart disease. And finally, Dr. Paul could tell from my genes that I have a weak Achilles tendon.
This is to do with the type of collagen which is in larger tendons like our Achilles tendon. You do have a slightly increased elevated risk. So what it means is if you were to play sport where there are a lot of stops and starts, you should be important to do warm-ups and warm-downs, strap your ankles, get proper orthotic footwear, all that kind of stuff.
Dr Paul is a senior lecturer at Auckland University and runs a skin surgery clinic. The former finalist for New Zealander of the Year says testing genes is all about preventing health-related diseases before it's too late.
Unfortunately, we also test for a lot of illnesses which we can't do anything about. So in my view, what's the point in testing for Alzheimer's if you can't do anything about it? If you can do something about it, by all means, but otherwise, stress response is so massive that the stress itself can kill you.
He says the test has been popular in the US and picked up by some professional football teams in the UK. But at up to $500 per spit test, unlocking the secrets to your genetic code doesn't come cheap.
I think that it's really very, very useful information, and I think this will be the norm. I don't know whether they should, but I think they will in 20 years down the track or 15 years, because people will realize eat an orange a day extra, reduce your risk of heart disease and diabetes and putting on weight from when you are 20. Why would you not do it?
Otago University Professor of Paediatric Genetics Stephen Robinson says gene tests can be helpful, but they don't look at the wider picture and consider factors such as the environment.
Look, I applaud people taking a big interest in the genetic underpinnings of their health and being aware that we're all individuals. There's no doubt about it. And medicine is always aspiring to be more precise and more individualised, and genetics is going to be a big part of that conversation. But I'd be careful in terms of actually sort of weighing in and taking genetic tests which actually bring a lot of precision at the present time to many diseases to alter your health.
Professor Robinson does see genetic testing becoming widespread in the health sector in the future, but says more research needs to be done.
For decades and decades we've sat around the kitchen table and talked about family histories and what runs in the family. You know, that's genetics in its purest and simplest but perhaps most realistic common sense form. And I think we all intrinsically know that actually genetics is not deterministic, that just because you're the offspring of some individual that you will necessarily replicate their health experience.
The Ministry of Health says before gene testing becomes usual practice in medical centres, it would need to be supported by appropriate evidence and research. For Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
Thousands of people have been flocking to the smelliest place in Dunedin to get a whiff of the city's first blooming corpse flower. The Dunedin Botanic Garden has extended its hours after the flower began to open on Saturday. It's the first time the plant's flowered in the 10 years it's been at the garden, and it only blooms for a couple of days. I asked the Dunedin Botanic Garden curator, Stephen Bishop, to describe the public response.
Oh, it's just been incredible. It's blown us away. We sort of thought maybe a few hundred people through each day. We've literally had thousands of people. We think we're up around the 15,000 mark. So for a little city like Dunedin, it's just an incredible turnout. It's like over 10% of the population has come to see it.
So you think if some people were saying, you know, here's a thing that smells like rotting flesh, it would probably make you want to run a mile. Why do you think people come to see it and smell it up close?
It's just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, really. It's such a rare plant. It is the world's largest flowering structure, and this one's actually quite small. Some of them get to about twice the size. So yeah, look, people are just really interested in the unusual and have flocked out to see it.
And what's it like to be in its presence in terms of the smell? How would you describe it?
Well, it's quite beautiful. The smell, not so much. I thought it was going to be a lot worse than it is. I mean, I can certainly smell it. But yeah, I'm a hunter, so I come across quite a few dead animals out in the wild, and most of those are actually a lot worse than this, or an offal pit on a farm, for example. It's been really interesting listening to people's descriptions of how it smells as well too. So yeah, a lot of people have said it smells like mum's dirty old socks, rotten cabbage, all sorts of things too. So that's been quite a laugh for the staff here.
And is it that kind of smell that you take it away with you? Does it stick to you, or does it stick around in your nostrils after you've gone?
It sure does. When it was most smelly, when it first opened on Saturday night, on Saturday, when I went home on Saturday night, I was instructed to go and shower and change my clothes when I got home. So it was lingering on me.
And what is it about it that gives it that smell?
Well, it's trying to mimic a dead animal, basically. So as you can see behind me, the colouring of the flower, it's that sort of flesh-coloured. The smell does, hence the common name, corpse plants, smell like a corpse. And even inside the flower, the structure actually heats up. So inside that flower, where the male and female flowers are, last night when we put a thermal camera in there, it was 34 degrees when it was only about 26 in the surrounding glass house. So it actually heats up to that rotting flesh temperature, really.
And that was the Dunedin Botanic Garden curator, Stephen Bishop. Well, after 6 o'clock tonight, we return to Waitangi, where Jacinda Ardern has made history by becoming the first female Prime Minister to speak during the formal proceedings. And do get in touch with your feedback. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. Relatives of a 16-year-old Dunedin girl killed on Friday say they've lost the heart of the family. A Dunedin doctor has appeared in court charged with the teenager's murder. Amber Rose Rush was found dead at a house in the suburb of Corstorphine on Saturday morning, and her family are devastated. In a statement, they say Amber had an amazing life in front of her and they've lost their hearts with her death. The 30-year-old doctor appeared in the Dunedin District Court this afternoon but did not plea. He was given interim name suppression until his next appearance. 3 men yelled and swore at the man from the public gallery during the brief hearing. The man is due to reappear in a fortnight. Dairy cows have been blamed for the high E. coli levels, which have forced the closure of a popular Patea River swimming holes in Stratford since late December. On February the 1st, E. coli was recorded at well over double the Ministry for the Environment's unacceptable risk action level, a mark that's been exceeded 6 times since early December. Our reporter Robin Martin has more.
The Taranaki Regional Council's Director of Environmental Quality, Gary Bedford, says DNA testing has found cows are the source of the E. coli and it is investigating to find the farm responsible. He says the E. coli readings could be due to dairy effluent discharges upstream. The provincial president of Federated Farmers, Donald McIntyre, says the E. coli could be the result of runoff caused by heavy rain rather than the faulty plant of one particular farmer. He says he trusts the council to find the source and take appropriate action. Ko Robin Martin tēnei.
The Ngāpuhi Runanga Chair, Sonny Toe, says the government is making promises to Māori that will be hard to keep. Speaking at Waitangi today, the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said her government wants to address unemployment, poor housing and high rates of imprisonment among Māori. Mr Toe says today's porphyry for the Crown on the treaty grounds was a winner for Ngāpuhi, but he says it would not be easy for the government to win its goals for Māori.
There have been statements over the last few days made by this government, which I think are very hard to achieve, and the measurement is going to be in how they work across iwi, local government, communities, and how they bring to fruition their promises.
Sonny Toe says the Prime Minister asked Māori to hold her government to account each year at Waitangi, and Ngāpuhi will do that. A planned expressway between Ōtaki and Levin is threatening up to 200 houses. The road is part of the Northern Corridor project, providing a faster way to get to and from Wellington. The Transport Agency today released a short list of 9 options for the 4-lane state highway, which will start at Taylor's Road north of Ōtaki and end just north of Levin. 2 of those options appear to go through the properties of Simon Burgess and his family. Mr Burgess says being forced to leave his home would mean leaving his dream.
How do you replace a lifestyle? How do you replace a retirement dream? I don't think they see that, and that's not their priority either. But everyone's keen on removing the traffic from Levin, but at what cost? To the community, essentially. Levin resident Simon Burgess. The owner of a tourism business in the west coast settlement of Granity hopes to be reopened in time for this weekend's Buller Marathon. The historic area, about 30 kilometres northeast of Westport, was one of the worst hit areas by ex-tropical cyclone Fehi.
Rona Perrott owns Miners on Sea in Granity, about 30 kilometres north of Westport, where she and her staff sought refuge from the large swells generated by the storm. She's returned to Granity to begin the clean-up and feels lucky the damage was not worse.
People that have lost their homes further up, they're certainly a lot worse off than what we are. I mean, what we've got is fixable, and in some cases it's not for them.
Rona Perrott. The Bulla District Council says 57 homes in the district have been seriously damaged, including some that may be beyond repair. The New Zealand share market has had its biggest one-day fall in more than a year, as a major drop on Wall Street spooked local investors. The benchmark NZS Top 50 index has closed down more than 2%, or 173 points, its biggest single session fall since early November 2016. Markets across the Asia-Pacific region have fallen sharply after Wall Street had its worst session in 2 years, because stronger than expected job numbers may lead to higher interest rates. New Zealand wholesale interest rates also rose today. Markets around the world have risen strongly in recent years because they offered a better payoff to investors than record low interest rates. It's 6:05. Sport. The city of Philadelphia is celebrating after their American football team won their first Super Bowl crown this afternoon. The Eagles upset defending champions, the New England Patriots, 41-33 in Minneapolis, allowing them to finally lift the Vince Lombardi Trophy after losses in the 1981 and 2005 NFL Grand Finals. Eagles defensive end Brandon Graham told NBC the victory was immensely satisfying.
We got a team that's resilient. You know, we're going to stick around for a long time because we world champs, baby, and it feels so good.
Philadelphia Eagles defensive end Brandon Ingram. The New Zealand golfer Ryan Fox can't wait for his next tournament after finding form at his latest event. Fox fired a final round 6 under par 66 to end in a tie for third at the Maybank Championships in Malaysia, his career best finish on the European Tour. The Aucklander now heads to Perth for the World Super 6, which starts on Thursday, where he'll join compatriot Mike Hendry and more in hope for a New Zealand win.
I'm looking forward to Perth. It's one of my favourite golf courses. I played there as an amateur 6 or 7 years ago and always enjoyed going back. And I love the match play format. I missed out in the playoff last year to get into Sunday, so hopefully a little better this year and get myself in that match play. And it's a really enjoyable Sunday from what I've heard, and hopefully my turn.
Ryan Fox. And the defender Lauren Geitz has earned a shock recall to Australia's netball team for the Commonwealth Games. Geitz has not played for the Diamonds since 2015 and missed her last season to have her first child. That's the news.
This week on Nights, quite a lot of polar stuff. Craig Stevens and the continuing story of the Ross Ice Shelf and his continued efforts to find out what lies beneath it. And Geir Kluwer on an exhibition of photographs of Amundson's Antarctic expedition. But just in case you think we're getting too cold on it, there's also a nod in the direction of Rio de Janeiro and a sonic tonic dedicated to the carnival on Nights with me, Brian Crump, this week after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taumarunui and Taihape, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and Taupō. Scattered showers with thunderstorms and possible localised downpours in Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells tomorrow with isolated showers in the west. Taranaki to Wellington, a few showers, especially about the ranges, but mostly dry in Wellington. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine, but showers about the ranges spreading elsewhere this afternoon with possible thunderstorms in Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Fine tomorrow morning, then a few showers. Marlborough and Nelson, fine apart from isolated showers about the ranges. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, showers possibly heavy and thundery in Fiordland, clearing tomorrow. Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine, isolated showers in Otago, spreading to Canterbury tonight, clearing from the south tomorrow. For Southland, showers becoming frequent for a time tonight, and the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with rain for a time tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Good evening and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Rowan Quinn, sitting in tonight for John Campbell. Coming up, we'll go to Sumner Beach, where the search continues for a missing teenager. But first, a historic day at Waitangi. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern became the first female Prime Minister to be allowed to speak on the upper marae, and she's promised to come back in future years and be held to account. During the visit, which has been hailed as a roaring success, Miss Ardern has been gifted taonga, offered yet more baby names, and even been asked for something that would tie her to Ngāpuhi forever. Te Manu Kōrehi reporter Shannon Honui-Thompson is in Waitangi. Kia ora, Shannon. What did Peeni Henare say during his speech today?
Oh yes, well today Peeni Henare said Ngāpuhi shouldn't be suggesting baby names, instead they should be asking for the baby's pito whenua or placenta to be buried here in Ngāpuhi, which would connect Jacinda Ardern and her baby to Ngāpuhi forever. This is a practice that many Māori follow, burying their baby's placenta where they're from or to their whenua to have that connection. Well, one thing's for certain, during Jacinda Ardern's time, she has certainly made a great impression here during her extended stay here in Waitangi. A new Prime Minister and a new venue for her official welcome to Waitangi. Nearly 100 warriors welcomed the government and opposition MPs to the upper marae on the treaty grounds this morning. But some things stayed the same. Kuia Te Whai Harawera in a wheelchair held Jacinda Ardern's hand as she escorted her onto Te Whare Runanga. It's not the first official government pōwhiri to be held at Te Whare Runanga, but it is the first time a female Prime Minister has spoken during the mihi-mihi. And Jacinda Ardern knew how significant that was.
I do not take lightly the privilege extended to me to speak from this veranda today, not only as Prime Minister, but as a wahine.
In his speech replying to the welcome mihi, Labour MP Peeni Henare responded to all the suggested names for Ms Ardern's baby. Mr Henare said Ngāpuhi shouldn't be gifting names for the baby, but asking for the baby's pito whenua or placenta, so it'll be connected to Ngāpuhi forever.
Tēnā pēr ko te ino e nui ka whakahokia mai te pito whenua o te whepi, whakatau ki runga I tō tātou marae, a pai kāinga ki roto I a tātou o Ngāpuhi.
Ms Ardern said it was something she would need to discuss with her partner Clark Gayford, who accompanied her to Waitangi.
But the fact that even the suggestion was made and that there were in particular kuia alongside me who really acknowledged that, that felt like a significant gesture, a really symbolic one, which meant a lot to me.
The Prime Minister has enjoyed a warm reception during her 5-day stay in Northland, and today was no different. Better housing, employment and lifting tamariki out of poverty were amongst the issues discussed, and those who came to listen to her agreed more needed to be done, especially for Māori.
I think she's with about all our tamariki and poverty and all education and stuff. Yeah, she's done really well, especially being Ngāpuhi.
And she's also very aware of the fact that many words have been spoken, many promises have been made on this marae and all around the country in Wellington. And the danger of that, and I thought the most powerful thing was that she said, hold us to account.
After the pōwhiri, the Prime Minister visited a local school in Paihia.
Well, thanks, Shannon. Can you tell us a little bit more about that general reaction to the Prime Minister's speech?
I think most people were really happy with what she said and, really were agreed with the sentiment of the speech. However, she's talking about a lot of change that's needed here, especially in the north, and I think they really want to see that change. So when she comes back next year, I think she may not get as such a warm reception if they don't see that change.
And what's happening there tomorrow?
Well, it's an early start for the Prime Minister tomorrow with a dawn service at 5 a.m. and after that she's holding her and her ministers will be cooking a public barbecue breakfast. And also here in Waitangi there'll be lots of bands playing, kapahaka groups performing, and lots of yummy kai stalls, which I can see have already started setting up for tomorrow.
Thanks very much, Shannon. That's Te Manu Kōrehi editor Shannon Haurui-Thompson speaking to us there from Waitangi. Well, a funeral will be held on Saturday for one of the teenagers who died in flash flooding in the Waitakere Ranges. Mitch Woolley and Sosi Turangaivio had been swimming with 3 others near the Cascade Falls when they were caught in a sudden downpour on Saturday. Mitch's twin brother Denver was also swept away but was rescued after clinging to a tree in floodwaters for several hours. Cherie Taylor-Patel is the principal of Flanshaw Road School, which Mitch and Denver attended as boys, and where their mother Tracy is an associate principal.
We've just come back from a meeting with the family and they're in process. It's a day of process, and the coroner, they're waiting just for the coroner to release the body. Then there's talks with the funeral directors, and we've just had a chat about what they want next and how they want the next few days to go. So yeah, big day.
And are they well supported as well?
They have just got a beautiful whānau around them. They've got family and really close friends, and Denver has got cousins and friends with him now. So there's lots of support, but we're part of that support too. So the van's been up the hill to the place with things that they're wanting to set up at home. Yeah, because they're going to have Mitch come home.
So just preparing for that.
Yeah, that's what they're doing right now, and they started how you do. They started trolling for photos, and tough time.
What was Mitch like? I hear you're in contact with him quite frequently. So what can you tell us about him?
Mitch was a fantastic student. He never ever had an unkind word to say. So the thing about Mitch was he was absolutely everyone's friend. He was really sociable, I would say gregarious, and he was a great team player. So he was in soccer teams, he was in water polo teams, but he was in all the teams that you can imagine. He sang amazingly beautifully out of tune, so he was stunning in our kapahaka group in the haka, and it was a bit trickier when you got to waiata, but we loved him and the enthusiasm he brought to everything he did. Him and Denver, they're both really good at making things, and so they're really practical kids, so they really enjoyed woodwork and building things. So around the school they've helped students with STEAM projects, where you're combining technology and maths and into arts projects and enviro projects, and so they were sort of pulled in to help out because they just had these skills, and the whole Woolley family, that's what they do. They kind of get stuck in and they make things happen, and so they were just great kids.
That's Cherie Taylor-Patel talking to our reporter Laura Tupou, and she says Mitch Woolley's funeral will be held on Saturday at Morrison's Funeral Home on Universal Drive in Henderson. Well, let's go to Christchurch now, where a boy is missing in the water at Sumner Beach. Police were called at around 3:20 this afternoon. Our reporter Rachel Graham's at Sumner Beach and joins us now. Hi Rachel, what's the latest there?
Well, I'm down at Sumner Beach, and unfortunately there's not much of an apparent search underway anymore. Earlier today there was a helicopter out searching for the boy, and a couple of boat crews from the Sumner Surf Lifesaving club here, but the helicopter and the Surf Lifesaving team have been stood down. A police officer I spoke to did say that they are still searching, but there's not much of an obvious search going on at the moment. Apparently there were initially 2 boys boys who were in trouble in the water, but one of them was able to get out, but I'm not sure whether he was able to do that with assistance or if he did that by himself. But St John did say that he was taken to a medical centre and he's not in a serious condition. But unfortunately, we haven't had reports that the other boy has been found yet.
And Rachel, what have the conditions been like at the beach this afternoon?
Well, today it's been sort of a warm but overcast day here in Christchurch. The sea does look really pretty rough. It's still quite busy down here, though. There's a lot of people on the beach and quite a few people out in the water, mostly windsurfers and the like. But it probably has been a popular day down here at the beach again.
Thank you very much for that update there, Rachel. That is our reporter Rachel Graham speaking to us from Sumner Beach. Well, it's estimated every New Zealander creates an average of 19 kilos of electronic or e-waste a year. That's a whopping 89 million kilograms in total. And the Ministry for the Environment expects this to rise to nearly 27 kilos per person by 2030. So what happens to our phones, laptops and heaters once they're broken or unwanted? Charlie Drever visited the shop Second Treasure next to Wellington's southern landfill to find out.
All the staff at the tape and whack it on.
The Second Treasure shop is alive with upbeat music and an eclectic mix of pre-loved goods line the shelves and walls, waiting to be picked through by customers. Staff never quite know what they'll find in the drop-off room when they come into work.
Let's see, we got a whole bunch of animal head costumes like a few days ago, and I'm not exactly sure what this is. It's like a caped Avenger.
But Wellington City Council Resource Recovery Manager Rod Boyce says there's one thing they do get a lot of: e-waste. Stepping outside the shop, I'm greeted by metal crates and pallets of plastic-wrapped televisions. There's a huge skip of electrical wires, while staff are chucking various electrical goods in another large skip.
That's the bin that we do 1 to 2 a week of, and it's about 100 tonnes a year. And we did a little bit of calculation. So the typical resident is supposedly supposed to produce about 20 kgs of e-waste per annum, and that number's going up. So if you extrapolate that out to Wellington, it's about 3% of the e-waste that Wellington City produces.
Rod Boyce says the problem is being compounded by electrical items that aren't built to last and consumers who lack the ability to fix their complex appliances. He says they try to give the unwanted goods a new lease of life.
A bin full of the flat screens, and they're actually about 60% of what we receive now, and many of them are only 3 or 4 years old. So I've got a bin full of cords over here, and so obviously the cords can be recycled for the copper. They chop them up and get the rubberised plastic off the outside, and the copper's recycled.
Many items are sold, with stereos and VHS players particularly popular. Outside the shop there's also a shipping container with stacks of laptops.
Half of these won't work and half of them will end up in the scrap bin, but we give it a crack basically. And so what we do is we pull all the hard drives out, we factory wipe them, so there's no chance of anybody's personal data ever being sold, and then the computers themselves are sold separately from the hard drives.
He says a really good laptop in working order would set someone back about $80 at most, significantly less than a new one. Acting Waste Operations Manager Emily Taylor-Hall says they've been raising awareness of the store by selling emergency water tanks, but they're keen to further spread the word to would-be customers. Everything apart from televisions are free to donate, and customers appear to be enjoying the bargains too.
You've got to scratch around, but there's often really good bargains.
But I mean, it's still in good condition and you're saving money.
Very good value. Last week I came in on Monday and it was half price for all the furniture out the front there. My friend took home a TV cabinet with his new flat screen TV on, half price, it was $4. It's a little treasure trove.
However, if waste production continues to increase at its current rate, they will eventually need to expand. In Wellington, for Checkpoint, I'm Charlie Drever.
A little bit of breaking news now. There's a 3-car crash blocking the left northbound lane just after the Terrace Tunnel in Wellington. The NZTA is warning of long delays there and it's telling drivers to avoid the area. Well, a unified Korean hockey team has played its first match since North Korean players joined the squad a few weeks ago. It comes as North Korea announced plans to send its ceremonial head of state to the south for the start of the Winter Olympic Games. Angus Randall from the ABC filed this report.
They went down to Sweden 3-1, but it's a strong first outing for the joint North and South Korean women's ice hockey team. Park Jong-ah is the team's captain.
Though it's a really short time, we're just doing sports, so I think there is not that big a problem. And as North Koreans try to adjust to our system, I do not have much difficulty in playing with them.
The team will get a chance to play Sweden again during the Olympics group stage next Monday, and North Korean player Jong Soo-hyun is confident they'll fare better in the rematch.
If North and South Korean players unite power and heart and play, then we will get a great result in the game. And I believe that this is going to be an opportunity to show off the power of the South and North.
The Swedish match is the first and only friendly before the games begin on Friday, and the North Korean players have a lot of adjustments to make. They're not only joining forces with the South, their new coach is an American, 29-year-old Sarah Murray.
There's a lot of challenges with adding, players so close to the Olympics. We added them, I think, 10, 12 days before the Olympics started. So adding players that close to the Olympics that haven't been with us for the last 4 years, learning our systems, kind of understanding how our team plays is difficult. But they've been doing a great job. We've been having meetings with them and they ask so many questions. The meeting's supposed to be 15 minutes and then an hour later we're still talking and we're still watching video. So they're eager to learn and get better. And something that I didn't even think about, North Korean is different than South Korean, the language. So for our team meetings, it's going through to English, to South Korean, to North Korean. So the meetings take 3 times as long, and it's really hard when, you have 3 different languages on one team.
For some South Korean players, the act of international diplomacy means they'll miss out on their hard-earned Olympic spot.
As a coach, it's hard to tell some of your players that you've been with for quite a long time that they're not going to be able to play. But like I said before, this whole situation is out of our control. So we're trying to make the best of it.
There have also been developments outside the ice hockey rink. North Korea will send its ceremonial head of state to the Games. Kim Yong-nam is the highest-ranked official to visit the South in 4 years. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres hopes the goodwill of the past few weeks will extend to nuclear talks.
Our objective remains the same, the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and we believe that the unity of the Security Council has created the conditions for that to be achieved with diplomatic engagement. That, of course, is not related to the Olympic Games, but it is something that we cannot forget.
The unified Korean team will march under a single flag at the opening ceremony on Friday.
That's Angus Randall reporting there. 2 people have been killed and more than 100 injured in a rail crash in the US state of South Carolina. An Amtrak passenger train with more than 140 people on board travelling between New York and Miami collided with a freight train. The Amtrak engineer and conductor were both killed. And the South Carolina Governor, Robert Sumwalt, says it appears the passenger train was on the wrong track at the time of the crash.
It's a horrible thing to see. To understand the force that's involved. 2 trains, that's about as forceful as you can get. The first engine of the freight train, of course, was torn up, and the single engine of the passenger train, the Amtrak train, which was headed south, was barely recognizable. It's quite a crash.
And it's the 3rd fatal crash on the US railway system in as many months. The BBC's Washington correspondent David Willis says it sparked calls for a renewed discussion about rail safety in the US.
Congress hasn't actually passed a long-term funding measure for the Amtrak railway system. For the last 10 years, it's relied on short-term, ongoing systems with basically existing funding levels being maintained. And President Trump, of course, has mooted plans for a big infrastructure program, about $1 trillion. It's unclear, though, how much of that, if any, would go towards actually enhancing the nation's railway system here, particularly in certain parts of the country, on the west coast and to the east coast as well. 30 million people a year travel by train, and Amtrak is saying that based on that, its safety record is pretty good. But I have to say, the National Transportation Safety Board, which is the federal authority which looks into accidents of the kind that happened in South Carolina today, found a deficient culture, as it put it, when it looked into a recent derailment back at the end of last year.
That's David Willis reporting there from Washington. And it has been an historic night in the city of brotherly love as Philadelphia Eagles fans celebrate their first ever Super Bowl win. Eagles fans have come out into the streets en masse to celebrate the team's victory over the New England Patriots. The Eagles won 41-33. CBS reporter Meg Oliver was there.
This is the first time the Philadelphia Eagles have ever won the Super Bowl. Confetti is all around, and people and friends, they're still taking pictures and trying to enjoy every last second of this. Nick Foles, the Philadelphia Eagles quarterback, sat on the bench for most of the season and then came on strong at the end. He was considered the underdog, but in the end, the Eagles proved to be too much for the Patriots and their legendary quarterback, Tom Brady. This isn't just a football game. This is also a star-studded event at halftime. The game started off with Pink singing the national anthem, and then Justin Timberlake brought the house down during the halftime. I have to tell you, one of the moments that was very special, he went up into the stands and started dancing with fans, and a young boy had the presence of mind to pull out his cell phone camera, and he took a selfie with the singer, and that obviously has gone viral. There's been some backlash, though, on social media because there was a part in his halftime act where he had a duet with Prince, who's from Minneapolis. Some people saying that it wasn't appropriate. Other people really enjoyed it. I have to tell you, here, everybody seemed to enjoy that halftime show, and it was quite the extravaganza.
And that is Checkpoint for this evening from me and the Checkpoint team. Have a lovely night and a lovely Waitangi weekend, and John is back on Wednesday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Relatives of a 16-year-old Dunedin girl killed at the weekend say they've lost the heart of the family. A Dunedin doctor has appeared in court charged with the teenager's murder. Ngāpuhi Runanga Chair Sunny Tau says today's pōwhiri for the Crown on the treaty grounds was a winner for the iwi. A funeral will be held on Saturday for one of the teenagers who died in flash flooding in the Waitakere Ranges. A planned expressway between Otaki and Levin is threatening up to 200 houses. Dairy cows have been blamed for high E. coli levels that have closed Patia River swimming holes in Stratford. And the New Zealand share market has had its biggest one-day fall in over a year after a major drop on Wall Street spooked local investors. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Whether you want to listen live or anytime, you'll